So we got a couple guest speakers. Julian's going to give us an update, but a lot of what I wanted to cover was just reflections and insights gathered from FIL Dev Summit. I don't know, no one here on the call was at FIL Dev Summit that I could tell, but ultimately, it was a very interesting week because not only do you have DESPA, you had Token 2049 and Dev Summit. So three very different audiences. And I didn't spend at Token 2049, but there was a lot of conversation going around in social media with like some people I follow that were there, people from my past, really interesting insights there as well. So let's just dive right in and we'll get to the discussion part because I want everyone to have a chance to ask some questions. From Token 2049, the big headline in terms of Filecoin with Arthur Hayes, and he predicts 2024 bull run and the ascent of Filecoin. He spent about 5 minutes really just with some of the most bullish public comments I have seen on Filecoin in a long time. And he had a packed room, standing room only of about 1,000 people. I think the room only held 800. So if you don't know Arthur Hayes, Arthur Hayes is one of the few kingmakers in crypto, from what I can tell. So first off, who are the kingmakers? I have Arthur as one. I have like Novogratz. I have Raoul Paul. I have Mark Yusko, Multicoin, A16Z. And when I say kingmaker, what I say is it's not that you need to have one of these investors backing you up to ascend, but it sure as hell helps. And that's why you have Arthur at Token 2049. We have two of the kingmakers, maybe even three, with Mark Yusko and Multicoin coming to Phil Vegas. We're still working on A16Z. We've tried a couple times, but we can't find availability. But it's not for a lack of interest I'm participating. And I just think as you get more kingmakers involved and with making them bullish comments like this, I think it's really positive and it can attract a lot more interest in the space. Mostly it gives people permission who may be on the sidelines to dive into the waters and do a little bit more research. So if you don't know Arthur Hayes, I'll put a link here to the article. But that was really exciting to hear from them. DESPA. So so the way the week broke down in Singapore, DESPA cohort 2 was Monday and Tuesday, and FIL Dev Summit was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And DESPA was really interesting. This is sponsored by Greater Heat. We had about 15 organizations from the region come and participate. And primarily these are CC providers within the area. DESPA could do a lot better if it wasn't for the visa restrictions for some of the China SPs just to get to Singapore. It can be challenging. But we still had a pretty good turnout. A lot of people from the community showed up for DESPA. And, as I thought about the Asia Pac market, there was really one line that I heard from the Greater Heat team that kind of stuck with my head, and I'll share it with you all today. The price for a one gigabit of bandwidth in the region, I want to say, was $9,500 per 1 gigabit for a 3-month contract. And the biggest blocker for storage providers within the Asia Pac community is whether or not they are willing to invest in bandwidth in order to take their business to the next level. Obviously, with even a 1 gigabit line, it's questionable of what you can really do at scale with making data sets available and storing large data sets. I know I've heard that line before, that bandwidth was an issue, but when you really dove in and broke down the costs and where people are today in their business. Like, and look, most of these participants are coming from CC. They may just be dabbling into FIL Plus. They're running 5 megabit lines. It just kind of paints the gap for me on what needs to be overcome if they're frankly going to continue to evolve and grow with the ecosystem. So we do have interested parties, and there were some interested parties that could not attend, but that is the hurdle for making this community within Asia Pac a difference maker. And there are absolutely people willing to play that game. I just think it's a little bit more challenging to present that business case to them in order for them to take on that expense. I'd say finally, the next thing when I reflect back on all the conversations I had at FIL Dev Summit, it reminded me of the importance of having a longer term vision. And I think so much of the community over the past 6 months, 9 months has just been focused on some of the challenges that are right in front of us. And I get it. They're big, hairy challenges. But it was refreshing to hear some of the storage providers that I talked to just having a longer term vision on how they win in the space. Because I do think like having that longer term goal changes the way you view short term challenges and keeps you committed to a set of priorities that I think are going to make a difference over the long term. And that means like, well, what is the long game? And what I heard most common with those playing the long game is they see that the goal is to get access to capital markets. When you have access to capital markets, that means like, Filecoin collateral ceases to become an issue. You have access and scale that you can open up institutional capital in a way that, frankly doesn't exist in our space currently. And when you work backwards from that goal, that becomes the reason to get SOC 2 certified. That's the reason to raise capital today, to make sure you can grow to a meaningful size. Meaningful size could mean acquiring other businesses. It could be meaning just adding your own capacity, doing different partnerships, but it's all in a goal to get to a critical mass so you can be taken seriously by public markets or institutional money. And it becomes a reason for paid storage deals. And I know I know this is a bit obvious, but when you hear some of the people that were at the FIL Dev Summit talk about it and how they're looking to move the pieces around the chessboard, it was frankly really refreshing to hear. The big line that I think was resonated across FIL Dev Summit was less than 1% of deals on the network are for paid storage. And, that makes a lot of sense in a lot of degrees, but how do we get that to 5%? And the people who are able to get off of zero and into the, either a portion or majority of their deals as paid storage are going to be the ones that come out of this bear market faster than others. I feel very confident about that. But I know that is a great stat on the current state of Filecoin. But I also thought we dove into that on our, Mara and I did a session with storage providers on exactly what do we need to get off of zero, meaning 0% paid storage deals. And this is what we heard was missing from our session. And I love the term surprise and delight, because surprise and delight really gets to how do you get over the switching costs or perceived switching costs when dealing with a client. Again, if it's a net new application, maybe storing their data on Filecoin isn't such a challenge. But if their data is already somewhere else, then that switch has a lot more importance. But mostly what we heard from people was user interface, security, privacy, and infrastructure, and retrievals. So user interface is okay, you think of the sales client opportunity, and you need to be able to visually have them understand and get the value proposition of what you're trying to communicate. So to me, it's a lot of this I saw as you need that demo experience. So any potential customer could see the value firsthand. And, this is your getting the business side of the house to buy in. But in any sales opportunity, you're going to have to close with the infrastructure and IT, security and privacy people. So how do you make sure that you have enough under the hood that you can show how this is all operational to make sure that you get these the IT infrastructure teams to sign off on this opportunity as well. And obviously, we have retrievals is something that you need to be able to demonstrate its utility in a setting with a client before anyone would give you any money.
Can I ask a question in this context? I've been reading up on the whole thing around SOC 2, and I don't know if it's my misunderstanding or is SOC 2 more of a US-centric compliance that is not handed out throughout the world, and worldwide it's ISO 27001 that's replacing SOC 2, because I see a lot of emphasis on our side on SOC 2, but where does it come from, and is this applicable on a worldwide scale? Stu, dive in.
Yeah, you're right. SOC 2 is primarily a US-based standard. It's an auditing standard. There is I think it's an international version of this. SOC 2 came out of SAS 70, and frankly, there's very little relation to the ISO like 27001, which is more of a security framework. So SOC 2 is really about auditing and getting rid of the need for on-premise due diligence audits that the cloud first kind of posed to the audit community. But there are similar conventions globally, but SOC 2 is probably the most well-known.
Yeah, I'll add to that. SOC 2 is not just a very American thing. Yeah, it is, especially in Australia, very widely used.
Okay, so this is something to look at for the wider community, not just for American community.
Any other so on the session itself, Mara and I had like a discussion for about an hour and a half on this. I thought, we'll share some of the statistics we found from just like casual polling within the session. But it seemed that most storage providers, at least in this room, would accept deals at $3 a tip per month. What that means is if we were to distribute a deal to you, or like any deal from the ecosystem that came to you, that would just be for one sealed copy, not the warm copy. $3 a tip seems to be the most popular selection that people would be willing to take on. Once you add the warm copy, I'd say the price went up to about between $4 to $5 a tip. Again, small sample size. There was about 7 storage providers in the room. So it's just good to start these conversations. And again, like everyone's going to have a different price, but it was good to get a sense for just where people are on their willingness to take on paid storage deals. But I don't think anything on this slide is earth-shattering breakthrough. But what I did find interesting is when I break down what I think is like the end-to-end. So ultimately, what we're trying to solve here, from my takeaway, is you need that full end-to-end experience if you're really going to generate a lot of pipeline of paid storage deals. And it kind of goes from left to right. And obviously, you need to make sure 1 to 2 to 3 work better if you're going to get initial traction. But one of the teams in attendance was Ghost Drive, and if you remember Ghost Drive, they presented at an all hands session we did in, I want to say May, and they did a demo of their platform. And this is the first time I had a demo of the latest version of the platform, and it was impressive. And I do think whether it's Ghost Drive, Steel Dome, or Lighthouse, or maybe another ecosystem partner we haven't even met yet, I do think this represents a good step forward into what people were expecting when they say client UI is a problem. So when you look at Ghost Drive as an example, they had user controls, they had logs, access management, they had AI built into the platform. there's a lot you can do to work within the data, the client's needs. You can sell all tiers of storage throughout this platform. And, again, when you can sell all tiers of all tiers of storage, that's a way to increase your total contract value, TCV. In order to get that, like, maybe it's not $5 a TIB, maybe you can get to $20, $25, $30 a TIB per month. And then that would be more than adequate to cover, your Filecoin expense in this scenario. But if you haven't reached out to Ghost Drive lately, I was really impressed. They did have a chance to demo for both Molly and Juan individually, and both of them were pretty impressed as well. And I just think it's, well, we say client UI is a challenge when we're in these sessions. Here we have one solution with potentially two more with Steel Dome and Lighthouse that, gives very different flavors on how to address the issue. So if you haven't reached out to Roma, it's really interesting. I think he's looking for partners to work on from a storage provider aspect, but that, that's some significant effort to build out those integrations. Then on the S3 side, we still have Project Motion developing. Is Angelo on?
I can share more about Motion, sure. Maybe I can just share the documentation we just wrote, and have people have a look there. Maybe that's easier. The project itself is moving forward very well, I think. We're in an alpha stage right now, moving towards, I think, September, I think. I don't know if Shieling or Marina is in the call, but they have, let's see. No, they're not. Let me share out that later.
Sure.
Yeah, that's maybe easier.
I do like Stu's comment, and I think what's even funnier is that the Canadian laughed first. I also put Telnex's API is also available. So again, I think there's going to be different flavors to this going forward. So if you're anxious to get started, and then S3 Gateway is your blocker, Motion is coming, but Telnex is re-releasing as well. So you can check out their Reddit if you're so inclined to do so. With that, I go back to where is this all going? And to me, like, this is why FIL Vegas is coming at such an interesting time. We talked about kingmakers such as Arthur Hayes, Mark Yusko, Kyle Samani from Multicoin. I mean, these are the indicators from the larger market that I think are going to have major impact. We talked about playing the long game on, like, if you want to play to get access to capital markets, chances are you need to be raising now. And, part of our goal for FIL Vegas is to make sure some of the interested capital providers within the space and Web3 infrastructure are attending and are engaged in the conversation, or at least aware of the conversations ongoing. And that's part of what FIL Vegas is about. I don't know why Ghost Drive is still at the top of this, but if you haven't registered, it's filling up. We're getting good, our speaker lineups. We do have a few open spots for any last minute additions, whether it's a workshop or maybe if we do have like maybe one or two main stage left for the AI and Filecoin conversation. So if you do have any final recommendations, we can still run those down for you. But hopefully we'll see you all in Vegas, because it's shaping up to be a really interesting event. Any reactions from the session? Mind you, with the session itself, this is a lot of Asia-Pac storage providers, where this conversation doesn't happen as often as it does on, let's say, this call.
Yeah, I'm more interested in the cost structure, Porter, but I'll reach out to you later to talk about that, because I want to get connected to those storage providers that you got that pricing from, like, for instance, like around the internet connectivity.
Yeah, so I got that from Greater Heat. Greater Heat gets that through their I mean, they're the ones recruiting for DESPA. They're out there engaging the community in Asia Pac, trying to get them to participate in future DESPA, current or future DESPA cohorts. And so they're going to Shenzhen, Shanghai, Hong Kong. They know their own expense and their own contracts that they can get for bandwidth, and that's a major blocker. I mean, we talk about all the time how like a 10 gig is kind of table stakes, and that price for 1 gig is a bit jarring.
They should just move to Amsterdam. Much better.
I'll let them know that was your advice, Hida.
Yeah. Well, I also have
going.
some other connectivity partners that would lower that cost significantly, because if they're in those locations that you just mentioned, there's definitely something to optimize. If they're paying 9,500 per 1 gig, that's extreme.
Oh yeah, you can get it much lower.
It is for a 3-month period, but nevertheless.
Yeah.
Porter, I still have the prices from Hurricane Electric from a year ago for all the regions. Let me just quickly find that in my inbox.
Thank you. They're lower, I know.
But it's to Angelo's point, unless we can provide alternatives, it's going to be challenging, or I would say require more vision from the business owners or stakeholders within a specific storage provider to take their Filecoin initiatives to the next level.
Another question, Porter. Are they worried about compliancy as much as like Europeans and Americans? Just like
are they worried about like SOC?
Yeah.
Some.
Yeah.
Some
is
are
that to cater to like the American or European or Australian market, or is that for like in Asia internally?
I mean, I think it depends where you're talking about, Angelo. It's for anybody who is doing business, like I would say outside of China, there is probably some awareness and I mean, if it's anybody in Australia or Korea, they have a much better understanding. Within China itself, it depends if they're also doing business outside of China. And I don't have like a vast set of data to back that up. This is based on my, conversations with folks last week. We did have in our survey, somebody said, certifications and SOC 2. So it's not off the table for sure.
Oh, okay. So it's more of like if they have an international presence outside of China, then it becomes a conversation.
Correct. That is my takeaway. But Porter, feel free to disagree with me if you had different conversations.
I didn't have that conversation, so
I did because I was trying to talk to people about ISV readiness and stuff like that. So also, Angelo, do I think it's totally representative of all SPs in China? That's really hard to tell. It was a fairly small event. So how statistically relevant that particular set of folks was, hard to say.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was just wondering, I'm doing like a workshop around governance in Iceland next week, also around GDPR.
Yeah, well, that'll definitely be of interest. But one of the things that I would say is that Greater Heat is interested in having that session for the accelerator program. So just the fact that they're asking for it, I think also is an indication that it is increasingly something that everyone needs to be aware of, regardless of geography.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.
I am going, so Mara, any other notes or reflections on FIL Dev Summit that you'd like to share with the group?
No, I mean, you've gone over these things. I mean, I think that yeah, if I had to sort of zero in on one of these, I think that the user interface, that upfront capability of really showing people what the process looks like and showing a demo and showing what a retrieval would look like, and would help a whole lot in bringing on enterprise deals. So if I had to pick one thing, that's sort of, I think, where I would rest.
Nathaniel, I'm impressed as always that you're making it this late at night again. You're the only other person that I can see on the call besides Orion, and Orion I'm getting to, that was there. So any other reflections from your week in Singapore?
I think I'm still hungover.
Besides the Fast and the Furious evening that Nathaniel, Yanbo, and Paul and I had on our last night in Singapore. But
Look, I had a ball. I think it was great to sit down with people and voice our opinion, and how we want to see, or how we'd like to see things being built out into the future. It's not every day you get that opportunity face to face.